Badlands, run into Badlands, explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, welcome to this week's Breaking History on Badlands Media. Gordon, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Matt. I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I'm okay. I know we had some big topics that we wanted to chew on and get the audience to come into our conversation and analysis that impact very much our current world in ways that might surprise a lot of people watching and that have a lot to do with something that didn't happen after World War II, which, of course, we're referring to the fact that we didn't fully win World War II, Gordon. I'm feeling like we didn't fully win World War II, and that matters today.
I'm feeling like you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think World War II ended the way that a lot of people, the official narrative says that it ended, meaning that the Nazi Third Reich, its leadership, actually won, or I'm sorry, actually lost and surrendered, and were all dealt with, so to speak, at the Nuremberg trials. And and to that point, we actually had President Assad back in December said as much in a public speech, where he said that there were basically Nazi high command leaders who were working with the West, and those who were willing to betray their comrades did not hang at Nuremberg, and testified against those people, and then were brought over and joined NATO and the CIA and NASA, among other institutions.
Yeah, that was a big deal that he said that. A world leader actually coming out and speaking the unspeakable was very extraordinarily important that he did that. I don't think a lot of people properly took in the implications of that strong message, because it's scary. You know, it's a little bit scary, and we know the world is corrupt. You know, it's easy to say the world is corrupt. A lot of people, that's sort of a comfort blanket almost. Mm-hmm. But to actually go and specify that it's not just that it's corrupt, it's that unreconstructed Nazis and fascists were incorporated into the governing control mechanisms of our entire Western world immediately after World War II was finished. Even before World War II was finished, I think there was already a negotiation already in motion before the Nazis even surrendered by Allen Dulles, by British intelligence, who were already there before World War II began, promoting the rise of Nazism, both in Germany, as well as in America, as well as in Canada. Canada, surprise, surprise, we had our own Nazi party. It was big. It was called it was under Adrien Arcand, and in Madison Square Gardens, New York. You know, you got these videos of 40,000 Americans going, like, championing Nazi rallies in Madison Square Garden, with marches down New York with big swastikas and George Washington.
George Washington, yep. 1939. That happened in 1939. Yeah, and I think, wasn't it called like the American Bund or something like that? It was I forget the exact name, but it was something Bund, and Bund is a German word. But yeah, I mean, they definitely had an American political party, Nazi political party, that in 1939 had a massive rally in Madison Square Garden with giant, like, building size posters of George Washington and swastikas and like all that stuff. And that's just completely glossed over, and we don't talk about it. And and this is all again tied to like the business plot of 1933 against FDR, when the fascists try to have a military coup against the American government. And so, everyone, welcome to Breaking History. Today, the topic is going to be Operation Gladio, and Matt and I were talking about this before the show. This is a massive topic. You could really think of like everything that we've done since I joined the show and we started working together. You could really think of almost everything we've covered as like a subheading of this topic. We could spend the next 10 episodes on Operation Gladio, and we probably still wouldn't cover everything. So we were kind of like trying to strategize, how do we tackle this thing? And I think rather than trying to squeeze in like every little tidbit of information in this one episode, because we're never going to be able to do that, I think it's better for us to focus on a few things, try to convey like a 40,000 foot view so people really understand what it is. how pervasive it was, how it infected everything, and really understand, like, we're going to connect this to a lot of the stuff we've been talking about on these other episodes, including obviously the CIA, JFK, and even I think the East India Company and everything that was happening in Britain in the 19th century, the oligarchs, the committees that were being formed, these proto NGOs, these committees that were forming among the nobility who wanted to do this new imperialism, kind of like this revival of the British Empire. So we're going to touch on all of that stuff. And there are a lot of people talking about this right now. I know that, Warhamster's been doing shows on this. Alpha Warrior has been doing shows on this. They've been working with the colonel that we talked about, Colonel Towner-Watkins, I think, has been on their shows. Your wife, I know, is a big researcher on Gladio. So this is going to be an exciting topic.
Yeah, and I pulled out a copy of my wife's book here too, just to show people. So if I'm saying this in full objective, not because it's my wife, full objective analysis. This book that she wrote, it's volume 1 of what is going to be 3 volumes, called The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Set. And it's a birth of international fascism and Anglo-American foreign policy. Highly recommend people pick this up on Amazon. It's thorough, it's meaty, and it's scary good. But yeah, no, you're right. It's so comprehensive. So I thought that we were looking at a video that you shared with me regarding somebody who got nabbed by the Russian intelligence before they could do something really bad. Do you want to play like a little video or intro that a little bit as a gateway into this broader discussion?
Yes, let's do that. And so the reason we picked Gladio for today is we were going to do maybe the Rothschilds up since Jacob Rothschild recently passed. But after this got deployed on Monday evening, this kind of Gladio just became the obvious choice. So many of you are probably aware, this is from Kaneko the Great, that account on Twitter, but the accusation of a failed assassination attempt on Tucker Carlson when he went to Russia to interview Vladimir Putin. And so I just want to play this video. It's a 1-minute video, and then we can talk about it. And let me know if for any reason this is not the audio is not, let me play it and tell me if the audio is playing. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to play the video, make it full screen.
Я Васильев Петр Алексеевич, 88 года рождения, уроженец Подольска. В ноябре 23 года был завербован сотрудником ГУР Украины через сеть интернет. Проходил обучение работе со спецсвязью, сбора подрывов взрывных устройств, а также работе с тайниками. 31 января куратор получил задание забрать с тайника взрывное устройство и использовать его для подрыва автомобиля.
Что вам обещали?
Денежное вознаграждение $4000.
Где должно было быть применено взрывное устройство?
На подземной парковке отеля «Фашизм» в Москве. Необходимо было забрать взрывное устройство из тайника и заложить его под транспорт.
Против кого планировалось применить взрывное устройство?
Ну, сообщили.
Сейчас вы знаете, кто был целью?
Да, американский журналист Такер Карлсон.
Что пошло не так?
На этапе подготовки был задержан, содеянным на Скайбе. Я Васильев Петр Алексеевич, 88.
All right. So for those who didn't catch it, who were just listening and not watching, because that was Russian or Ukrainian with subtitles, this guy was grabbed by the Russian intelligence services, and he confessed that he was being paid $4,000 to basically attach a car bomb to a car that Tucker Carlson was supposed to be in, and to kill Tucker Carlson. And really, we'll get into the details of it in a minute, but the reason that this has Gladio's fingerprints all over it is because, as we've discussed before, Gladio is the stay behind, was the stay behinds after World War II in Europe to secure, Western democracy, and prevent the Soviet takeover of Europe through like socialist and communist sympathetic politicians or controlled politicians. And they really did this, but they subverted those efforts by the Soviets by assassinating targeted politicians and other leaders as well, like other figures as well. But I think that program probably extended beyond just people who were explicitly working for the Kremlin, and that kind of it becomes a lot more gray as to who exactly are we targeting. Are we targeting people who are just working in earnest, who have ideas that we don't agree with? And I think we probably find that is exactly what, and then that just becomes like full blown totalitarianism when you're talking about that. But car bombs was really, that's what stuck out to me. It's like the car bomb. It's like that was what they were doing, and that a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was British intelligence training up the CIA, which had just formed in the 50s. They formed it in 1947, and British intelligence were Royal Engineers is who founded British intelligence, and that was their specialty, was explosives. So let's I'm going to pass it to you for a minute if you have anything to respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, on that note, I just picked up a little clippet here from this is something from the Mikrovitz website that's been maintained. It was created originally by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense in 2000. This was done in 2014 to outline and give profiles of all of the enemies of Ukraine. And the actual website itself has something like 6,000 different enemies of Ukraine. These are civilians and journalists. A lot of them are journalists. A lot of them are politicians. A lot of them are just influencers. Some are in Ukraine. Many are in Russia. Many are in the West. Tucker Carlson is on that list there. You have Helga Tsepler-Rush. You've got Jeffrey Sachs. They put on there. There's some big names. These are some of the more notable, bigger names on the list, but it's a big list. Darina Dugina, Alexander Dugin's daughter, was on that list. This is an actual image.
Worth noting, I'm glad you bring it up real quick. She was killed by a car bomb. And allegedly, and we know now because it was exposed, the CIA was the one, like it was a CIA car bomb, like they were behind the car bomb. And I mean, the allegation is that he, like the father, Alexander Dugin, who is he's like Putin's chief political philosopher, basically his brain, as they call him.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that, but he's definitely a significant thinker in Russia. Let's just say that.
Okay. And yeah, so the allegation was that he was supposed to be the target and his daughter caught the flak, whether that's true or not, but she was killed in a car bomb. So again, Gladio's fingerprints all over that.
Yeah.
So
and that's actually the website specifically with her page. And every time that one of the people on the list gets killed, and there's already been a few dozen who have died over the last years, they update the list. They have a little image saying liquidated. That's her face there with the word liquidated, saying how it happened. And it's the Russian Foreign Ministry gave a presentation a few months ago pointing out that the servers hosting this very, very, I mean, this is like an illegal site. You know, this is a terrible site, but the servers are being hosted in either Canada or the United States, but it's definitely understood by our intelligence agencies who is hosting, who's protecting these servers, who's updating, maintaining, and funding them. We know there's quite a bit on this. So that's part of it. The other thing is not only do you have this whole assassination thing, and so Tucker Carlson's life was nearly taken. Now, you know, we know that it's tied to this sort of operation that has been maintained as we've seen it put to work over decades and decades, especially during the Cold War, murdering civilians, journalists, as well as high-level politicians. I've got a list of a few of notable ones that we'll throw out in the course of our presentation. But again, the issue of the Nazi thing, you know, keep in mind that book cover that my wife put together has the black son of the occult. That's an extremely important Nazi symbol within the highest levels of the SS. This is a scandal that took place last year on Women's Day, when NATO's official Twitter account, or X account, whatever, posted all these videos of powerful women in Ukraine fighting, and one of the women that they selected had on her military gear the black son of the occult. When you zoom in there on the upper right-hand side, you see very clearly that that's the black son of the occult. You see, you know, we've seen all sorts of videos of swastikas and other Nazi regalia on people who are part of the right sector. The person who killed Darina Dugina was a woman who was an official member of the right sector, who was sent into Russia to carry out the car bomb. So it's the question is, did this come out of nowhere? Did this come out of 2014? This whole assassination squad operation that's carrying out hits, Or is this something that's tied to a much broader historical current, which obviously anybody watching our show, they already kind of implicitly know the answer to that. But yeah, this is directly tied to Operation Gladio. So do you think maybe we should say a word about what was Operation Gladio?
Yes.
Define it
But
quickly.
before you go there, I just want to point out, just for anyone like listening, because I know there are people like in our community who are very skeptical about Tucker Carlson. Like Putin called him out for wanting to join the CIA. His father, he had confessed his father was like in the CIA or somehow connected to CIA. Understand something. Killing Tucker Carlson, had they succeeded in killing Tucker Carlson, it doesn't have like Tucker could have been working for the CIA. Like Tucker could be a CIA asset. Like, but killing him. Imagine what would have happened if he had been murdered in Russia, and it was purported that it was done either by Ukrainian operatives or Russian operatives or whatever. All the people who believe in Tucker, who like Tucker, who happen to be on the right, who happen to be somewhat sympathetic to Putin, who happen to be like anti-Ukraine and against the whole Ukraine war, they all of a sudden would have a reason to not like Russia and not like Putin. So it's like, you got to think of it like that. Like these people are willing to sacrifice their own people. So it's bicameral. Like maybe Tucker's working for the CIA, maybe he's not. But even if he is, it's still like this whole Operation Gladio, like killing him still makes a lot of sense because he's sacrificing a pawn, just like they sacrificed Alexei Navalny, in order to advance a narrative.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't trust Tucker. I do believe that Putin was correct to take the jab. I think he has been a CIA operative. However, I do think he represents a faction of the oligarchical elite of the establishment that recognizes that their interest is not going to be well maintained if a nuclear war is unleashed. I mean, it's a mistake to sort of see the oligarchy as one homogenous blob that's totally in lockstep with itself. There's factions within the oligarchy. We saw this in World War II when you had a faction within the Anglo-American establishment that wanted to continue with the Hitler project and then the Italian fascist project that they put decades into cultivating and incubating. And they were like, Neville Chamberlain, Lord Halifax, King Edward VIII. They're like, no, wait a minute. We know he's kind of like not completely behaving the way our calculations predicted, but we put so much work into it. But we got to go full hog on this now. And then you had another faction around Winston Churchill, Leo Amory, not good people, terrible people, but they were a little bit more in touch with their self-interest. And they were like, no, we have to abort this. It's not that they're not fascist. It's not like Churchill and Leo Amory were not fascist. They were fascist. But like they wanted a global fascist world state under the British Empire. But they were like, no, we overstepped our bounds. We miscalculated. This thing is becoming too Frankenstein-y. We have to abort and try to live to fight another day and reconstruct it with more patience after we abort this project. And there was a fight. There was a big fight, and you had a bit of a coup inside of Britain. You had fights within the American establishment. So I think that the best way I see sort of Tucker is that he is representing a faction within the Anglo-American establishment that kind of wants to put the genie back in the bottle, shift gears, try to build some positive relationship with Russia again, maybe try to like sweet talk Russia into becoming a partner with the U.S. like we could have been in 2002 when Putin was entertaining joining NATO. That's obviously off the table now. But some people want to do that and then have this, maybe it's possible to get a special U.S.-Russia friendship against China. Maybe that's possible. Maybe there's all of these things. Now that being said, what he did was very useful. It's a very useful thing, and I could see why certain power structures would not want that sort of thing to break the narrative of Putin is Hitler. Putin is Hitler. They've put years of work into psychologically creating this in our minds, and it was destroyed very effectively by that Putin-Tucker interview. It undid billions of dollars worth of propaganda efforts. So yeah, more disclaimer to the story.
Yeah, but yeah, with that said, why don't you tell us about Gladio?
Okay, yeah, I guess, and then you could chime in and say if there's any way that you would look at it as well. The way I would see it is it was the offspring of Churchill's Operation Unthinkable. So people could Google that, go to Wikipedia, Operation Unthinkable. It was a two-part operation launched about 2 months after Roosevelt died. Roosevelt died, keep in mind here. So that's an important timeline. Roosevelt dies on April 12th, 1945. 2 weeks later, you have the San Francisco Conference that establishes the United Nations. It's now completely infiltrated with roundtablers, Milnerites, Fabians are all over the place. Count Coudenhove-Kalergi is like overseeing now. The guy that Roosevelt was trying to ice out, who was being brought in by the CFR, is now overseeing a big chunk of the construction of the articles at the UN conference. That's now the end of April. Then you have Churchill in May, who sanctions the creation of Operation Unthinkable. And this is the idea of, while we're still at war with the Nazis, we haven't finished World War II yet, we're still allies with the Russians, to essentially say, to prepare to go to war with Russia. That, okay, we can see the war is going to end. The next enemy has to be Russian. We have to destroy Russia. All of us.
The official tagline is for Operation Unthinkable is to impose upon Russia the will of the United States and the British Empire.
Oh, there you go. That's it. That's the motto. And so part of it was to launch an attack to castrate Russia, maybe even launch nuclear weapons. I mean, America had the monopoly. That was like being entertained. The other part of it was to carry out this war using British Special Operations Executive guerrilla tactics that would be then used with those who had the best knowledge of fighting Russians, which is Nazis and Italian fascists, use them and incorporate them, hire them to be a guerrilla warfare operation under the guise of the Anglo-American Axis. So use them in Italy, in France, in Belgium, in Amsterdam, in everywhere. You just organize all of the unreconstructed Italian and German fascists and prepare for the new war against Russia. Now, the attack on Russia didn't happen. The second part of it did happen. So the organization of what became known as NATO's secret armies was put into motion, and that is where it took a little bit of time. They had to spend a couple of years saving some of the higher level Nazis that they brought to Argentina, that they gave new names. They sent into the United States. They sent into Canada. Many of them were Ukrainian collaborators, like Chrystia Freeland's grandfather. Michael Chomiak, who was a very high-level collaborator with the Nazis in Ukraine, was given a new life in Canada. But a lot of them were. Mykola Lebed, also, who ran the Organization of United Nationalists, OUNB, was also brought into the CIA and given a cardboard cutout front company called Prologue. Prologue Research was sort of his cover that then created all of the textbooks about what was World War II all about. He created all of that for the Ukrainian community in Canada and the United States that went into shaping the minds. Like, because you're like, why do all of these young Ukrainians believe that World War II was all about fighting Stalin in Russia? It's like, wait a minute. The only people who thought that way in World War II were the Nazis. But yet these are all the people who think that Stalin was the bad guy in World War II, and maybe the Nazis weren't so bad. It's because they had the CIA pay for their textbooks that reconstructed their narratives under Mykola Lebed. Bandera was also brought in. So they just basically reconstructed all of this stuff as they were building up NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization under Lord Halifax, who said the purpose of it is to keep Russia out, Germans down, and America in. That's the point. And that's exactly what we've seen. Germans have been crushed. Russia has been kept out. So when Putin said, hey, maybe we should be a part of NATO back when Russia was really weak in 1999. No, the point of NATO is to destroy Russia. They would never allow that. And then to keep America in, to keep America locked in. So that was, again, NATO was not American. It was a British operation. And then they organized all of these teams of NATO, of what became known as Gladios, the Italian branch of NATO's secret armies. Every country had their own name, but again, the one that became most widely known because the former prime minister who was involved in it, Andreotti, gave a speech in the Italian parliament in 1992 announcing, like, yeah, all of this information somehow got acquired by these journalists. So he had to do a limited hangout and basically say, yeah, there are NATO secret armies, and yeah, Gladio exists, and it just means sword in Italian. And the fascists didn't lose. They're still, and the last thing I'll say is it partially involved, like you said, targeted assassinations of high value targets, but also it involved creating a strategy of terror. Basically create a situation where people would be so frightened of terrorism, bombs in malls and schools and in hospitals, that would be labeled on Maoists and Leninists. So all of these there were a bunch of like useful idiots who were recruited to these Maoist Leninist cells, using radicalizing literature, not that different from how the FBI recruits Al-Qaeda operatives and then uses them as cover stories to do things like 9/11 in our current age. Not that different in technique. And then the population who's seeing these bombs will be so terrorized that they will run into the embrace of their fascist leaning governments that are captured by these fascist structures to give them protection and then give up their security. And that was part of also the technique.
Hey, real quick, can you explain real quick who Stepan Bandera is? I think that's an important. There's an important point that I want to make, a connection that I want to make real quick before we continue.
Okay.
Just like a 30-second or 45-second synopsis of exactly who he is.
Leading Ukrainian fascist who wanted his own Ukrainian fascist state, who wanted to collaborate with the Nazis to do that, and who went to jail because he was a little bit too unwieldy and radical for the Nazis. They wanted somebody who was going to see Ukraine as a proper subservient power, as a breadbasket producing the food for the Nazi Reich after World War II. He wanted his own thing. But he oversaw the murder of something like 100,000 Jews, gays, Poles, Slavs, and he was recruited by Allen Dulles to work in Germany after World War II, and died in 1954. And what do you got there?
Okay, so do y'all see? I've showed this before on various shows, but this is a picture that was posted by the Ukrainian embassy in the United States of somebody in Israel hugging an ultra-Orthodox Jewish pilgrim, hugging a member of the Azov battalion who was fighting in Gaza in Israel, right? And this, I want to point out this little emblem right here. See this little red and black emblem with a Star of David on it. So that red and black flag right there is, if you can still see my screen, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army flag from 1942 to 1956. And you can see there's Stepan Bandera's face on it right there. So that is like kind of like the Bandera flag. The red and black band is the Bandera flag, and it has been adopted by the Azov battalion. So just kind of bring everything full circle and connect it again to something that's happening right now. The Azov battalion is using a flag from a guy who is connected directly to Operation Gladio.
Absolutely, yeah. You see his imagery everywhere. Right sector, Pravi sector, Svoboda is another pro-Bandera party. He was actually made a national hero before Yanukovych took power in 2010 in Ukraine, and he was the one who was ousted in that CIA color revolution overseen by Victoria Nuland. But before him, there was another guy, forgetting his name, the prime minister who was installed by Soros in 2004, who made him a national hero. Yushchenko.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So Yushchenko made him a national hero. They started having like buildings, monuments built up, and there's dozens of these monuments built up to Stefan Bandera as the great hero. And he was rehabilitated, and so after Yanukovych took him down and erased his hero status, that was the first thing that the new Victoria Nuland managed regime did in 2014 is they rehabilitated it yet again, made him a national hero yet again. And so, but then again, it's not just that he was used to rally these neo-Nazi groups. It's also that he was himself brought into the Reinhard Gehlen. So Reinhard Gehlen was Hitler's top intelligence chief. His other chief of staff was a fellow named Alfred Huizinger. Alfred Huizinger was
Huizinger.
Hitler, That was the Nazi chief of staff, and Reinhard Gehlen was Hitler's top intelligence chief, and both of them were given jobs right after World War II. So Gehlen was given the job of reorganizing and actually creating the Bundeswehr, the West German intelligence, after Berlin was cut up. So his job was, and it wasn't just him who was given the job by Dulles. It was his whole network. He had thousands of networks of operatives, of agents that were all given employment under his network. They were all Nazis, and they were all the ones who were then appointed to set up and create West German intelligence. Bandera was one of his lieutenants who was brought in to work with him, carrying out the murder of anybody who was anti-fascist in Germany. So there was a lot of assassinations of resistance leaders after World War II who were, operating within France, within Belgium, within Germany itself, who did such a good, courageous job fighting the Nazis during the war, and then afterwards were taken down by this network. A lot of them took control of the press. Agentur Press as well had its origins in one of these creatures, Yves Guérin-Sérac, who is the head of the French branch, the Organisation de l'Armée Secrète, the organization of the secret army. That also played a role in the murder of JFK, as well as the 30 attempted murder attempts of Charles de Gaulle, who is a major enemy of this fascist network. And Heusinger, who I just mentioned was the chief of staff of Hitler. You know what he did after World War II, right?
Well, what's that?
He became the first chief of NATO.
Heusinger, yes.
Heusinger, yeah.
Yep.
So Heusinger was made the
he
top dog.
He literally became the NATO general. It's like, yeah. I mean, could it be any more obvious that NATO is just a continuation of the Third Reich? NATO is the Fourth Reich, really. I mean,
it is the Fourth Reich. I absolutely
that is what it is.
Yeah.
And a few things that because I think we're getting into a really, really interesting point here. I'm going to share a link in the chat between War Hamster, who came on a few weeks ago, and the Colonel Towner-Watkins, the interview they did about Gladio, which they touched on some really interesting points. And one point that I want to share, you mentioned Churchill. Churchill got his start as a military journalist in the Boer Wars in 1898, 1899. And I want to share my screen real quick so I can share this. So in the first Boer War, they got their butts kicked by the locals, by the Africans. And so the Boer Wars, real quick, let's talk about maps.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so the Boer Wars, we're looking at South Africa right here. So South African map. Blue is the British, orange are the Africans. And basically, they were trying to take over the South African Republic. They were trying to. So this is the Boer Wars. So the first time they went in there, they're fighting farmers basically, and the farmers were able to win, and because they had what they called stay behind units, and basically they would wait for the British to march past them, and then they had a bunch of like weapons and munition stashes that they would then go get, and then come up behind them and shoot them all, like ambush them and shoot them all, similar to what the Americans did in South Carolina during the American Revolution. And Churchill witnessed this, and he was writing about this and sending letters back to the Morning Post, which is who he wrote for. And basically he was accused of by Rudyard Kipling and other writers at the time of like glorifying war, what they called new journalism, new imperialism. Every story was like this adventure, like hyper masculinity, like, hey, let's go out and conquer the world kind of stuff. Which feeds into the exact stuff we talked about with the East India Company. And the guy that he was following at the time was Kitchener. And then, you had Gordon of Khartoum, who later in Sudan, or a few years before in Sudan, had his last stand, glorified that. So, and then eventually you get Lawrence of Arabia. And I think that's where all those ideas about building up Lawrence of Arabia as this figure comes from all this. But this is where, as Colonel Towner-Watkins pointed out in that interview, this is really where Churchill kind of gets this idea for these stay behind units that can really come in and kind of clean up the dissidents, people who aren't going to work with this hegemony that they're trying to establish with NATO.
Oh, it's interesting to tie it into that. That's very interesting.
So I'll share that link, but didn't want to break your chain of thought, but just wanted to.
No, that's good. That's always context, right? It's always everything is caused by something else. So that being said, people will get little shifting gears momentarily as a point of advice to people who might get a little demoralized because they're like, well, isn't that purgatory? Isn't it the case that you're just forever going to be unpeeling another layer of an onion, contextually shaping a lower layer of an onion forever? And it's like, no, there is final causality with human agency. You know, like in planets, there's no human agency in the sense that planets don't have free will. But there is laws of nature animating their future behavior according to certain electromagnetic and gravitational so-called forces that are discoverable and that have a purpose, right, around us, around suns, and suns have relationships to other suns, and there's a galaxy with an integrated sort of quality of interconnectedness, but there's no free will. The planet is not going to wake up and say, you know, today I feel like Venus, even though I'm Mars. You know, human beings, we have free will. We can be animated by ideas about things outside of ourselves, as well as at the same time things inside of ourselves at the same time. And usually they are affected. You know, you discover more about yourself when you discover more about something in the universe, in time and space outside of your being. And at the same time, you discover more about the universe when you think about who you are and you self-examine, and you discover what makes you tick as a person, which, you know, you as we are all subjective individuals. We're unique souls, but at the same time, we are objectively true. Like, we exist in the universe. We're a part of God's creation. So we discover part of God's creation when we discover ourselves. So there's this reciprocity. And so we can be animated by false ideas that wear the masquerade or the image of something true, but have none of the substance. Even maybe some of the are evil, but they appear good. That's why people vote for shitheads, you know, who might sound nice. They're not saying I'm going to kill you. That, you know, that's not why people vote for Trudeau or Obama. They have a nice appearance. They sound nice. They use nice lines of words following each other. So it makes mushy people who think emotionally vote for them. And then the effect of their policies is to kill you, but they couldn't be successful if they just said it literally. So that's sophistry, take the art of making the false appear true. And then we can choose to be stupid and to believe in stupid things that we should know better, or we can choose to do more work mentally and believe in truth that is beyond the surface appearance of things. And so we can with us, when trying to make sense of human history, it's animated by humans with intentions to do things for good or for bad. And there is an end point where you can say, I can't know everything. There's a lot of things I can't know, but I can know to a satisfactory amount that satisfies my reason sufficiently the nature of good and evil as an organizing principle of all history that allows me to understand, why did this war happen? Why did that revolution happen? Why did Rome collapse? Why did Cicero get killed? Why did JFK get killed? What was he tapping into? There are these things that we can know pretty well, to the point that we can use it in order to change our future. And
Absolutely.
that's always the key. The future is always the key about studying this type of history. So all that to say, what you did with Churchill was fantastic in the Boer War, tying that into the growth of the structure and the techniques deployed after World War II. Fantastic that you did that.
And I'll credit the Colonel with Colonel Towner-Watkins with this. And the other thing she said is that she said she's interviewed military leaders who were operating in Europe. And I think she mentioned a 3-star general who had never heard of Operation Gladio, because it is, in the grand scheme, it is a relatively recent disclosure, like the past 20 years or so. It's a relatively recent disclosure. And it's like, if you're someone who's just focused on their career and just focused and you're not out like researching, you aren't necessarily going to hear about this, because it's not something that like the news is talking about or anything. Yeah. So you actually have like 3-star generals in the military who are operating in Europe who have never heard of Operation Gladio and don't realize that the CIA are murdering, assassinating political leaders, assassinating journalists, assassinating people who are getting in their way, who are pro-Russia, who are pro whatever the thing is that they're against, whatever stands in opposition to the global hegemony. And they're taking those people out systematically, either through murdering them or buying or paying them off or just destroying their life or whatever. It's all part of it. And I think the public now really understands, they've seen it for themselves, what that looks like, what they're doing to Donald Trump right now. It's like this is all kind of ties back tangentially to Operation Gladio.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's actually read a couple of ads, and then will continue pulling on this thread a bit more. And I got a quote actually that touches exactly on what you just said from Yves Guérin-Sérac, who I mentioned earlier, played a key role as a French fascist. When we get back from a commercial break, we're going to look at a couple of quotes and continue scratching away on this beast. So the first one, here, I'll read the first two and then you can read the second two. Hold on a second. Let me just having trouble here on my end. 1 second. Okay. Okay, Badlanders, with election season now in full swing, Trump train sightings are predicted to be higher in the coming months than ever recorded. Are you ready? If not, we've got you covered with the heavy-duty, high-duty hitch mount flagpole kit from your Patriot store. Built to withstand higher speeds, the dual locking system with pin and thumb screw will keep your flags securely in place even on highways. Made in Eastlake, Ohio, this heavy-duty high hitch mount comes with a 3x5 American-made American flag for you to proudly display on your vehicle or on an easy pull flagpole at home, also found at your Patriot store. These are heavy-duty flagpoles proudly made in America, built with extra quality and care. To get Badlanders ready for the election season, your Patriot store is offering buy 2 flags, get 1 free, and buy 2 t-shirts, get 1 free. You have to use promo code Badlands35 to get this exclusive discount. So hurry, this deal is too good to last. There's also a huge 50% off site-wide sale happening now throughout the week. So hurry, these deals won't last. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/Patriot Store and use promo code Badlands35. And then the next one is a MyPillow.
To celebrate the new year, we're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save 60% on our Goose Down comforters, the best comforters ever. They go perfectly with our MyPillow bed sheets and duvet covers. Save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels. They're made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. Our seasonal flannel sheets are finally in. You save up to 50% and they sell out fast every year, so order now. They're truly the best flannel sheets you'll ever sleep on. Or save up to 80% on all our clearance items. And this is where it gets even better. For a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Awesome. And everyone, if you're enjoying the show so far, please hit the thumbs up. That helps us with all the analytics. And the chat also, you don't have to do the second map, but the chat is asking for a link to where they can purchase your wife's book. So when you get a chance, grab that, throw it in the chat, maybe throw it in the comments too, just because the chat will go away when we stop streaming, but the comments, it'll stay for people listening.
All right, in the next few minutes, I will definitely put in a link to get that book. And yeah, so the thing I just wanted to show quickly is Yves Guérin-Sérac. This guy is such an important player, and again, he was part of the thing that tried to kill de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle was smart, was really good on staying alive, incredible, much smarter. You wish that his team was on site to assist JFK a little bit more and give JFK better advice. But so de Gaulle, Yves Guérin-Sérac here. Let's just look at a quick quote from him.
And de Gaulle's the guy, by the way, who during the petrodollar episode we talked about, he went and asked for the gold back in 1968. So just to connect a few other things, he's the one who came to America and said, "Give us our gold. Here's the petrodollars. Give us our gold back." And that's what started the whole panic to get on a petrodollar.
Yep. So Sérac got 2 quotes. They're just good because it's from somebody who is such a high-level player. This is my wife cited this in her book, and I forgot to put on the specific resource or the specifics source, but it's in her footnote section, where he writes, "Our belief is that the first phase of political activity ought to be to create the conditions favoring the installations of chaos in all of the regime structures. In our view, the first move we should make is to destroy the structure of the democratic state under the cover of communist and pro-Soviet activities. Moreover, we have people who have infiltrated these groups. And the other thing that also is a continuation of this manifesto that went public, it was supposed to be only for his inner, the inner initiates within his grouping that were supposed to oversee their various cells and agents. And somehow somebody within that grouping made it public, kind of a bit of an embarrassment because he was still trying to pass himself off as a respectable person. So it was a bit scandalous in 1961 when this went public. But he says here, 2 forms of terrorism can provoke such a situation, which is the breakdown of the state, which is the point, which is blind terrorism, that is committing massacres indiscriminately, which cause a large number of victims, and selective terrorism, that is eliminate chosen persons. This destruction of the state must be carried out under the cover of communist activities. After that, we must intervene at the heart of the military, the judicial power, and the church in order to influence popular opinion, suggest a solution, and clearly demonstrate the weakness of the present legal apparatus. Popular opinion must be polarized in such a way that we are being presented as the only instrument capable of saving the nation. So it's just very rare to get something so candid. Very, very rare. So high value that was
the alien dialectic for Badlanders know. Burning Bright talks about that all the time. Present the problem, present the solution, herd people right into the place you want them to go.
Yes, exactly. It's not that. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of it's complex in its execution, but it's simple in its basic recipe. It's not that complex in its in the brute force ultimately of the technique. And keep in mind, so if you just look at all of there were hundreds of cells. You have the Red Brigades that was used in Italy as well as in Germany, carrying out not just massive public bombings, but also the direct hits of people like Alfred Herrhausen, the pro-development president of Deutsche Bank, who was murdered by the Red Brigades in Germany, which has been proven was overseen by British and German intelligence that were protecting the Red Brigades, that killed Herrhausen, because Herrhausen was saying, no, we need to help Russia develop industrial power, develop infrastructure if we're going to be able to manage the dissolution of the Soviet Union. This is 1988, 89 that this discussion is happening. And there were members in Russia that were thinking, okay, we'll dissolve the Soviet Union on the condition that we get the assistance to massively get scientific and technological progress with our American and Western allies. And they were told these lies by George Bush Sr. and others. And of course, there was never an intention to honor them. The intention was to destroy Russia. But Herrhausen wanted to honor it and create a special German-Russian relationship based on industrial development, which has always been the fear of the British Empire, going back to the 19th century, under Otto von Bismarck, who was working with Alexander II around a German-Russian pro-industrial, pro-American policy of protectionism, rail development, using the American system of political economy with national banking to fund all of that growth. This was being done in the 1920s under the Rapallo Accords in 1922, with the Russians under Citroen, the foreign minister of Russia, meeting up with Walter Rathenau, the foreign minister of Germany, organizing a cancellation of all debt repayments of Versailles and a building up of industrial power between Germany and Russia together. And Warren Harding, who was also probably assassinated, the American president, was also protecting that negotiating process that bypassed the League of Nations, that was all based on bilateral treaties between sovereign nation states. So all of these people ended up dying. Everyone. I mean, Walter Rathenau was killed by an organization Consul. That's a British-run terrorist cell or terrorist grouping in Germany that killed 300 German politicians in the 1920s, like Rathenau. And this organization Consul, when they were illegalized after Rathenau's murder, they were banned. They basically just were rebranded and became the paramilitary group of the Nazi SS. That became the Nazis' paramilitary stormtroopers, was the organization Consul. So again, you could see how this was always used by Western intelligence, these anarchistic, pro-fascist, anti-Semitic groupings all over the world to kill leaders you don't like. They did it with Alexander II. They did it with Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth was not a lone gunman. He was part of a broader network of a whole KKK that is Scottish Rite, Freemasonic Scottish Rite terrorist apparatus that was overseen by people like Albert Pike, that was operating in Canada as well as in the South, that was an occult proto-fascist organization, right? That used him as part of a cell under Mary Surratt to kill Lincoln and carry out various other things that they were also doing during the Civil War. There's another grouping, a branch of it in Russia, killed 2 czars, and many finance ministers, interior ministers were killed who were against this whole British control takeover of the world that Churchill represented. And it went all the way on. So this is what the Red Brigades were done, basically as a new form of organization console, passing themselves off as Maoist Leninist. But the whole thing was run by fascist Nazis who wanted to destroy Russia and China as much as they wanted to destroy America and Germany. And it killed all of the leaders. Aldo Moro from Italy was killed by this thing. A bomb was placed on his plane when he was fighting to use his control of the biggest energy company of Italy to help Africa industrialize. He was killed. The Secretary General of the UN, what's his name? Dag Hammarskjöld. His plane went down in Africa too, because he was also resisting this thing in 1961. They killed obviously JFK. They tried to kill de Gaulle. It's a big list. Adnan Menderes in 1961, the Turkish prime minister, who was also fighting this thing, was killed by this apparatus. So again, people, just to say, Americans, Europeans thought that this was Kremlin, Beijing terrorists trying to kill them. So they were like, please, state, protect us. Like Serac says, they fell into line, and they gave the CIA more power. They gave the military-industrial complex more power to protect them. While the actual fact was, it was never Russia or China controlling these terrorist cells. It was always the CIA. It was always MI6. It was always the Nazis that was running these things. So yeah, just an important point, because this is all being revived today. We've all been hypnotized by the trauma we went through in the 50s, 60s, 70s under this propaganda, and it's all being revived. We could see it, how they're reviving these same psychological tropes to get people to once again not look at British intelligence, not look at the Round Table movement, not look at the Fabian Society, which is actually trying to destroy everybody and bring about a depopulated world government, and instead find a boogeyman in Russia or a boogeyman in China.
Well, and to that point, so you mentioned earlier the Italian Prime Minister Andreotti. Andreotti. He's the one who like disclosed that publicly, and the reason he did was because there was, as I understand it, there was like tension, or there was some sort of like political dissidence or tension going on between him and the president at the time, Francisco Casiga, and he basically accused Casiga of being involved in Gladio. He was like, "You're involved in this," and Casiga said, "Yeah, I did help set that up. I'm not like happy about it, and like I'm not proud of it, basically." And then Casiga then turns around. This is like I think in the late '90s, if I'm not mistaken. And then later in 2007, November 30th, 2007, I was just looking it up to make sure I got the date right. He tells an Italian newspaper that 9/11 was actually done by the CIA and Mossad. He said, "This is an open secret among all intelligence agencies worldwide. Understand this completely." And that is where, and then that, like the alternative media community online runs with that, like spreads it around, and then starts pressuring Ron Paul and others to talk about this. Ron Paul actually gets asked about this on air, I think on like Fox News or something. He like distanced himself. He's like, I'm not going to go there. But then the reporter or the interviewer says, well, will you at least tell your supporters online to shut up about 9/11? And he says, absolutely not. So
right,
just trying to bring this all full circle, that the disclosure of Gladio involved a guy who then later came out, an Italian president, who then later came out and said, oh yeah, by the way, he was the one who told the world that 9/11 was the CIA and Mossad. And then Ron Paul gets asked about that, doesn't want to go there. He's like, I don't want to go there. But then when he's asked to tell all of his supporters to shut up about 9/11, he says absolutely not. So just wanted to connect all those dots.
Yeah, that's Super, super important little, because yeah, I mean, this unfortunately should be common knowledge, but we have to revive and rekindle these little memory sparks to bring them alive once again, because it's so strategically important to have this much more front and center in all of our memory and our minds as we navigate through the misinformation. And yeah, Ron Paul was, hats off to Ron Paul. I mean, he had to operate in a very sticky, dangerous environment for a sustained period. And I don't agree with everything Ron Paul pushes as far as his concepts of banking and other things. However, like, I'm not a libertarian, but is what I'm saying. But all that to say, he's a courageous man of integrity. He was consistent, and he had to use a very careful type of language in navigating, like Trump often has to do too. Or we've seen cases of many people who have political influence who have to stay alive while at the same time being effective. It's not easy. It's not easy, especially in a world where you have these Nazis running amok.
When you consider at the time in 2007, like all the stuff that Putin explained to Oliver Stone, what was happening in Ukraine, where the CIA was like planning to overthrow Ukraine, Ron Paul probably knew about a lot of this stuff. He probably knew Operation Gladio was still going, like still happening. So it's like, if I speak out against this, they're going to kill me. I mean, that possibility I think exists, and we understand that today. That even now there are elements of the CIA who are probably doing stuff like this all over the world.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we've seen the effects of that in a variety of places. Actually, one thing that's of note is John Bolton gave a whiny interview in 2022 with Bloomberg, where he was complaining that because of the he's like, because of China's authoritarian surveillance state, we haven't been able to maintain our payments to our assets in China. And he's complaining because China's, like, if you go to like a Chinese search engine, and I do this sometimes just to see like what a different country is thinking, right? Like what's being put out. It's all about, I'll share some screenshots of this. In their news cycle, it's, if you're in like Beijing, if you're in Shanghai, what you're getting as a citizen as far as your news cycle is another MI6 terror cell has been taken down, another CIA cell has been removed. And that's what they're actually being shown, because that's what's actually happening. Is you have like a deconstruction of all of these carefully built up intelligence networks that were being overseen by unreconstructed. In the case of China, it's the Japanese fascist collaborators. That's what you have in Taiwan. That's what the Kuomintang was. They were the ones working with the Japanese fascists who were part of, they had their promise under a one world government to have jurisdictional control over the regions of Asia, especially China. They were going to control China, just like Ukraine and Germany was promised to control Russia as their slave colony. That was what Germany was promised by their Anglo-American, controllers. You will get Russia as your slave colony of underhuman Slavs. Ukrainians were given a dual message. Japan was also told, look, you are the superior race to the dirty Chinese. They will be your slave colony after World War II. That's why 10 million Chinese were killed by the Japanese fascists. But it didn't happen without the collaboration of high-level Chinese collaborators, just like you had high-level American collaborators of Nazis, high-level Russian collaborators of Nazis. Many of them were around Leon Trotsky, who ran the deep state structure of Russia back in the 30s and 40s. The same thing happened. This is what's behind the drug cultivation programs too. The Kuomintang didn't just go to Taiwan alone and then became a colony of the U.S. military-industrial complex. You had Kuomintang in Burma, in Cambodia, in Laos. You had that were always working with Dulles, producing the opium, producing the drugs that were then sent in to the United States, laundered by HSBC and other, Wall Street banks that were then part of the mafia complex. The mafia was always working with the CIA. They were assets of the CIA in South America, in America, in Canada. What do you got there?
Oh yeah. Well, when you started talking about Bolton, I just realized that I posted this the other day, and I thought it was worth watching. This is a 1-minute clip of him back, like you're saying, in 2022, talking about it being involved in color revolutions, foreign color revolutions. And I think it's worth watching, like understanding this conversation, understanding Gladio, Like, let's just watch this real quick because I think it feeds into exactly what you're talking about right now.
Former White House Security Advisor John Bolton confessed on Tuesday to have helped to plan a coup d'etat in different countries. During a televised interview in which he referred to Donald Trump's responsibility in an attack in the Capitol, the U.S. diplomat affirmed that overthrowing a government is a lot of work.
On our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once in a lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work, and that's not what he did. It was just stumbling around from one idea to another. Ultimately, he did unleash the rioters at the Capitol. As to that, there's no doubt.
All right, yeah, that's really all I wanted him to say. But to what you're pointing to, and then I want to connect it to China. That is what he's describing as basically Gladio in a nutshell. And it's worth pointing out that the day that the May 20th, 2017, that was the day of the sword dance when Trump landed in Saudi Arabia and got the sword dance, which was a big deal, and a lot of people understand why it's a big deal. China also announced that it had basically caught all these like dozens of CIA assets and I don't know, like arrested them, executed them, whatever. But the New York Times was in full blown panic because the CIA's all of their assets in China had suddenly been exposed and caught. And they couldn't run whatever operation they were running against China, they couldn't run anymore because all their assets had been exposed and caught. And I can't help but wonder if those events are not connected, the sword dance and that event taking place.
Oh, it's an interesting idea. Yeah, it's true. The chronology of it all is suspicious, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I'd like to think that there is a connection, and we'll probably never fully know until maybe deep in history in the future. Maybe we can look back on this, and some things can be said that can't be said right now. But yeah, I think that's the part of the thing is that by looking, if we actually had a sober analysis of what Putin was able to do and how he did it, as far as pulling the rug out from under the feet of a big chunk of the deep state that we went through last week. And if we actually had a sober analysis of how Xi Jinping over the past 10 years has been able to do the same kind of Putin maneuvers, but in some ways even more effectively, honestly, we would be able to then have a better sense of how to do it ourselves. Because frankly, if we had a better sense of how our history was actually wired, how people like Lincoln, his key collaborators in America, as well as McKinley, as well as Franklin Roosevelt and JFK. If we saw how they operated, we would have a better sense of who the enemy actually is and how to fight it and how to do it effectively. That all of that stuff is we're being mentally castrated by being only given a very narrow sort of framing of reality that ignores all of this fight and that paints Russia or China or some combination as our nemesis. And it's like, no, there's something going on. We're told to hate and fear them because they're fighting the same oligarchy that wants to both kill them and kill us. That's why all of these bad toxic feelings are being invoked like a magic spell inside of our collective psyche because of undealt with trauma we experienced in the Cold War. All of the propaganda sponsored by the John Birch Society, that itself was run by followers of Claire Chennault, who was running the drug running operations that became Air America. All of the drug running operations run by the CIA through Taiwan, through all of Southeast Asia was being run by these flying tigers, of which John Birch was himself a high-level member of Claire Chennault's operation under Alan Dulles' watch, creating the entire mafia drug complex entirely. And this is what was then bankrolling the creation of all of these think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, all of the Habsburg, Austrian school fascists. I mean, Ludwig von Mises and von Hayek. I'm just saying this straight up here. This is verifiable. They were the advisors for the world's first officially fascist government in 1919 in Austria. They were the economic advisors of the first, before Italy went fascist, you had Austria go fascist. They were advising that government. And Hayek, in his The End of Road to Serfdom, has a whole chapter on the need for a world state to keep the world behaving by a common rules-based order of free trade. Who's going to enforce it? Who's going to enforce the free trade? It has to be some world power that can oversee and veto what a national sovereign government would want to do that may not want to do free trade at a certain point for some reason. So you need a power above the nation states. That's what he talks about at the end of Road to Serfdom. I'm reemphasizing this because we're also being played on that issue too. And a lot of the same pro-fascist Nazi groups in America, overseen by the Wall Street banks that were trying to kill Roosevelt, do the bankers coup, that were running the American Liberty League to keep America out of the war. This was like Thomas Lamont, the JP Morgan network that were funding the American Liberty League that was behind the business coup. These bankers, the reason why they wanted to keep America out of the war was not because they were pro-peace. It's not because they were pro-peace. It's because the plan was that the U.S. fascists were promised the jurisdiction of the world under a new world order if the Nazis won, which was the plan in the 20s and the 30s. That's why Prescott Bush was financing the Nazis into World War II and was found guilty for doing that. And they wanted to stay with the plan because that was a big chunk of control that they were promised of most of South America and Central America. That was all going to be theirs. So when that didn't work out, then they had to sort of recalibrate. And you had all of these think tanks that then promoted the idea that if you want to be a good Republican, a good conservative, you have to be a follower of the Austrian school of these essentially Austrian followers of Adam Smith, who just retweaked Adam Smith for the Austrian Habsburg Empire under, and that became what infiltrated all of the Republican parties in the 70s and the 80s under Zbigniew Brzezinski, under the neocons, the Straussians. They all brought this stuff in. And then the Democrats were told, if you want to be a good Democrat, don't look at what Roosevelt or JFK are doing. Don't look at Bobby Kennedy. Don't look at them. Don't look at American history. Follow British Cambridge apostle John Maynard Keynes, pedophile Satanist. That's who a good Democrat wants to be, is a John Maynard Keynes who hated Roosevelt, who Roosevelt in turn hated, who said Keynes was a mathematical fetishist, not an economist. And we were all told, yeah, Roosevelt was the New Deal. That was Keynes. It's like, no, Keynes was for one world government. He was for the Bankor, one world.
Keynesian economics. Yeah. I mean, you hear people rail on that all the time.
It was a total fake dichotomy. We were all told you could either be an Austrian fascist or a British imperial fascist, both of whom are Malthusian, both of whom actually kind of work in a Hegelian dialectic. So that's your choice. There's nothing outside of those choices. And then you have Klaus Schwab saying the greatest threat to the Great Reset is libertarianism. At the same time that Javier Milei goes and gives his assigned speech saying all the right words about libertarianism, personal values at the World Economic Forum, he's turned into this celebrity amongst the libertarian movements of the world. And it's like, wait a minute. It's a controlled dialectic. It's like, if you look at what is Javier doing? He's doing what Pinochet was doing. He's like privatizing everything state owned. He's cutting the budget in social services. He's cutting the budget everywhere, putting people out of work, killing social safety nets.
Which sounds really good on paper, but actually is going to end up being even worse, because now you're going to have all the oligarchs come in, purchase up everything at dirt nothing, and then the international oligarchs, are now going to control everything. And
it's 1990s perestroika Russia. That's what he's doing in an already abused Argentina that's already messed up from like having the CIA and Green Berets manage South America under this dragnet going back to the 1960s, when the Green Berets were created actually in the 50s as an offshoot of British Special Operations Executive programs working with Gladio to carry out wars against Russia and China in the Cold War. That's what's been running South America, and that's what's been destroying Argentina under the IMF, the World Bank, and they're doing perestroika Russia all now under the name of freedom in Latin America again. And we're all being told, oh yeah, that's how to fight Klaus Schwab, is more. Yeah. What? How did that?
That all connects, by the way, to Iran Contra and all and like stuff we talked about with United Fruit and Banana Republic and Chiquita Banana. You mentioned real quick about not wanting to get involved, and then once we did get involved, the military kind of took over, and they were strategized to defeat Hitler and the Nazis. Worth noting that Patton. So Patton comes up from Italy. He's coming up from Italy, and he wants to take. He's in like southern Australia, like Austria. He's in like southern Germany. He wants to take Berlin at the end of the war, and he was told not to take Berlin and to allow the Soviets to take Berlin. Those were like orders that were given him. He was super bitter about that. He was very angry about it because he was like, if I had gone in there and I had taken Berlin, I could have protected all the German people from all the terrible things that happened to them because the Bolsheviks came in and went roughshod across Berlin, basically just like let out all of their anger and their pent up rage from the war on the citizens of Berlin. And then Patton, of course, was killed. Like, I mean, there's conspiracy theories about him being killed after World War II. He dies after World War II. And then if you want to get even more conspiratorial, Donald Trump was born 9 months after or 6 months after he dies and looks very, very similar to him. That's if you're a Hindu, you might believe in that. But anyway, maybe we should do an ad read and then
let's do an ad read.
And kind of
okay, one second. Let me pull up. What is it? New kits. Okay, here it is. All right.
Yeah, let me. My screen's loading. 1 second. I'll let you know when I'm ready.
All right.
So we are doing. Is this Wellness Company?
Yep.
Okay, Wellness Company. Go. Life is unpredictable. If we've learned anything these last 4 years, it's that while we can't possibly predict everything that might be thrown at us, we can prepare for it. Introducing 2 new emergency kits from the Wellness Company. The first aid emergency kit for everything from sports activities to camping trips. Compact and convenient, this kit contains critical prescription medications and supplies that everyone should have on hand. The travel emergency kit is specially designed for life on the go, compact, lightweight, and loaded with essentials for any adventure. Whether it's a road trip, a hike, or just the unpredictability of daily life, you'll be ready. Next level readiness is at your fingertips with emergency kits from the Wellness Company. Stay one step ahead and to have peace of mind for the unpredictable. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/TWC. That's badlandsmedia.tv/TWC and use promo code Badlands for an exclusive 10% discount. That's badlandsmedia.tv/TWC, promo code Badlands.
Okay. And next, I believe, is No Bugs Beef.
No Bugs Beef. All right. Badlanders have set No Bugs Beef on fire. Have you ordered yet? Let's face facts. America's supply chain is going to be increasingly disrupted in the coming months, which means it's not if we'll have a food shortage, it's when. Having enough protein to feed your family for several months is essential for your survival. That's why we've partnered with badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs. They provide sous vide, freeze-dried all-American beef from ranches in Texas that have never, ever given their cows an mRNA jab. The beef stored in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers for maximum shelf life will stay shelf-stable for more than 10 years without refrigeration and with maximum nutrition and flavor. All you need to do is soak it in the water for 15 minutes and it's ready to eat. These are not typical survival meats. They're premium cuts of ribeye, New York strip, tenderloin, sirloin, and chuck. Get your family ready for the chaos at badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs and use promo code Badlands for an additional 10% off your order. That's badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs, promo code Badlands.
That's good. Thank you. I just wanted to let people know who are watching live that I just put in a link. I saw some people were befuddled or confused about my analysis of the von Hayek von Mises versus Keynes issue, and I just put into the Rumble chat a link to a deep dive that I conducted, which is part of volume 2 of the Clash of the Two Americas, going through the origins of that entire controlled opposition and the obfuscation of the real American system of political economy. That is, I've been trying hard to bring people's minds to focus on what it was that America created as a system, a science of political economy to solve the problems of the economic castration of what the 13 colonies had gone through and the suffering that they had gone through after the war. So there was something specifically created that every American president who is murdered in office, all 8 of them, are all trying to invoke in varying degrees, but it's the same constitutional banking structure that has produced every burst of progress, leaping over limits to growth, in advance and improvement of the sovereign nation state, as well as the rights of the individual, at the same time as the right of the individual, as well as the general welfare of the whole nation state, are improving at the same time, not either or, but at the same time. There is the invocation of the American system of political economy, going all the way up to what Franklin Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy and his brother were doing. If you look at their policy outlook and what mechanisms they were bringing online, what powers they were wielding to advance massive mega projects, the hydroelectric dams, the nuclear power development of the 1960s, the idea of an anti-imperial fight to assist small countries that had been abused in Africa or South America to stand on their own 2 feet and develop full spectrum economies that could support themselves through manufacturing, as well as high quality infrastructure, as well as robust private sector enterprising at the same time. That system has been obscured from our history books. There's been an effort to wipe it out of memory. Every leader from who's murdered in Russia, who's murdered in China, who's murdered in Germany, are invoking the same American system, from Walter Rathenau to Kurt von Schleicher, who became chancellor in 1932, who was killed, who was trying to do what Roosevelt was doing in Germany, to Tsar Alexander II, to Otto von Bismarck, who was fired by the oligarchy, who basically was trying to bring in the American system into Germany. All of it, and it's tied directly to what the Renaissance. There was a science of economy built during the Renaissance before the American Revolution, which was based on the idea that all human beings are sacred, made in the image of a living, loving God, and that value is based upon giving people a multiplicity of objects of enterprise by investing in social improvements, and that the state treasuries must not go to war or define value by extracting wealth from somebody you're stealing from, or speculating, or doing usury by lending with interest. Those are illegitimate forms of value. The only legitimate forms of value that was coming out of the leaders of 15th, 16th century France and England and Germany, who were at the harbingers of this new system that became the American Revolution as its next phase, all were of the understanding that no, we don't put money into war making or looting. We put money into infrastructure. We create new schools, new academies. We train orphans. We give people the ability to find talents and to find a use for their life in contributing to society through their discoveries. That's what Benjamin Franklin was doing when he was studying how do you create a patent structure that could give people a financial motive to having great ideas that could benefit society as well, right? So there's this whole thing that has been obscured from our research. And so I put a link to one entry point in the chat box in Rumble. Maybe we'll have it under the video too. I'll ask Brad to put it up so people can go into more detail on this. My wife's book goes into some detail. My books go into some detail, but I really want people to realize, to break free of this, Austrian school versus British school choice that they've been told that they have between Malthusians who both want world government and depopulation, and we're told, pick one.
That's exactly right. It's a really, really good point. And if you would just drop the link, like make a comment on the video as opposed to like in the live chat, and that way it'll just be there forever and just say link to like link you reference. I put your wife's book there, and I linked a few other things that we discussed there, and that's just a good place to document so people watching the show later can see it. But yeah, you bring up some really, really good points, and that's exactly what it is. Like the controlled opposition, I think they learned, like when you go back and you study enough of these iterations of how they failed, like they failed to do it here. And what I pick up on is that they failed because they weren't controlling both sides, is because you basically give like an out. And so once they figured out that if they control both sides, if they're the ones leading the counterparty, the other party, the opposition party, then they don't really care who wins. Doesn't matter which side wins, because they're gonna be the ones as the policymakers anyway, controlling the policymakers anyway. Like to your point, like Malay and others. I mean, I do think that Malay, like the IMF, the stuff that Argentina being the number one debtor to the IMF, which I didn't know. I think that has a lot to do with what Malay's doing right now. Pulling out of BRICS, et cetera. So it's interesting that, you know, to think that like they're going to build this little sandbox, then force us to play in that sandbox. You're not allowed to go out of the sandbox. You got to pick this side or that side. Maybe there's a third option, but it's really just two sides. I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about at Badlands for the past few years, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. No, Hegelian dialectics suck. Stay away from them. And I mean, problem solving. You know, the question is, you know, we human beings are the creature that we solve problems. We think every other creature, you know, that if there's a drought that hits and geologically that happens, it's always happened before there were humans. There were still geological droughts. Rabbits will go cannibal. The mommy rabbits will eat the baby rabbits when there's like scarcity, and their populations will collapse. They'll recalibrate to the new norm of whatever, you know, scarcity is prevalent in the biosphere. Humans don't have to eat our babies if there's a drought. We can like discover astrophysical cycles. We can plan ahead. We could put some of our food into reserves, and then when there's a problem, we can eat the food instead of the kids or the old people. And the oligarchy wants us to go for Soylent Green, right? That movie, the Charlton Heston, which that's their kind of a big sick fantasy of the oligarchy, is to get us to ultimately want to eat ourselves. In this weird eco cannibalistic system of mutual, of what is it called, of euthanasia. You know, kill the old. What do you do with their body? Well, first we can turn into fertilizer. So you got this whole spiritualism of like sick baby boomers who went through years of propaganda and Gaia worshiping, conditioning, and psychedelics, who are thinking that their spiritualism is to be connected to the purity of Mother Gaia, and the best thing is to have your body just become fertilizer. And it's like, well, that's the point of a graveyard. Yeah, sure. You go back to nature. Your body does. Your soul lives on. But I mean, now all of a sudden you have policies in like Colorado and there's a big promotion to say, well, let's actually feed food with our bodies. Let's actually use the humans as food, as fertilizer for agriculture. Right. And it's just like each one's just incrementally moving us closer and closer to
godlessness. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's sick, but
exactly. Well, yeah, we'll do before we get into the Badlands boosts. I'll just share this last thing. This is more of like a and I'm just going to share the Wikipedia page because it's a relatively. I was digging yesterday through the CIA Vault 7 for Gladio stuff, and really the only thing that would come up was Turkey. It was like Turkey, and about the Turkish Gladio. So I've been reading about Turkish Gladio, and it really has more to do with the present than with like the history lesson that we're teaching here. But the Turkish Gladio branch was very, very profound and very, very active, like after like 1960s, 1970s. This group, like the Grey Wolves, is something that I just like have hit on, and I think I'm finding connections here between like the Grey Wolves and like Erdogan and like the current government. But basically they admit even on like the Wikipedia page, which is like a CIA run website, they even admit that these guys, like their progenitors or whatever, were working with the Soviets and then basically switched sides to fight with the Nazis because they weren't happy with the Soviets. And so these people were fighting with the Nazis. These are Turks, like in Turkestan, Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is where like the people of Turkey come from. And it's north of Afghanistan. And basically they were fighting with the Nazis, and they joined the Nazis. And then after that, they are now in Turkey trying to launch like a ethno state, like a revitalization of the Ottoman Empire, and basically like using like radical Islamic terrorism, like pro-fascism, pro-Islamofascism, all the stuff that we've hit on Badlands, all the different content creators in Badlands have been talking about. These guys were doing, and there's even like connections between them as far back, like as recently as like 2007, 2008. There's a report in 2015 about them working with factions of the Turkish military. The EU has been asked to like designate them as a terrorist organization. So I don't have enough to like really distill like a full coherent argument. It was just very interesting to me as I'm also like writing these like this article on Khashoggi. I then stumble onto this, and I'm like, okay, so here's Gladio. They're murdering people in Turkey. like in the 90s. I'm seeing evidence from the Vault 7 of them killing people in Turkey in the 90s. There's connections like around like Erdogan. It's very, and then you think about the Muslim Brotherhood in the background, you think about British intelligence. So I don't know. Like, I'm going to pull on that thread and see where it goes. I'm just kind of, that's just kind of like it's a weird thing. It's a very weird thing. But obviously, like Cyprus, they mentioned Cyprus a lot. We know that Cyprus is like a place where they use to launder money. That's where Kolomoisky has his Cyprus passport. Zelensky took away Igor Kolomoisky's Ukrainian citizenship because it's against the law in Ukraine to have to be a tri-citizen, because he is an Israeli citizen, a Cyprus citizen, and a Ukrainian citizen. So Zelensky took away, I think a year or two back, Kolomoisky's Ukrainian citizenship. And of course, he's the one who created the Azov battalion. So he would be like one of the oligarchs that Putin is basically going after by invading Ukraine. Just very, very fascinating connections. And it's just like, as you pull on like I'm looking into stuff for our Gladio show, and then I'm seeing things that are like directly connected to like my Khashoggi dig and other stuff. So it's all this stuff's connected, and that's why we do this show.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's where, man, I'm gonna actually share in the description box a wonderful essay. Thank you, by the way. I heard about the Grey Wolves, and again, it's so lateral in my thinking that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Put a little like question mark on it, and I never circled back to investigate like what was this whole Gladio thing in Turkey. And I know, yeah, it's please, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you pull up on this thing, because it's so important.
It's just fascinating that even on Wikipedia, even the CIA and Wikipedia is like, yeah, these guys were fighting with the Nazis, and then we just folded them right into Operation Gladio, and we were using them in Operation Gladio to run our ops, like in that part of the world. And it's like, okay.
Well, see, the other thing I want to map out, since I'm increasingly getting into the occult, and my wife and I are both doing a lot of work from two different directions on mapping out the different causal agency of the occult underground in shaping and creating the FBI, creating the CIA, creating all these different organizations. It's a weird way of having to explore. Like, it requires a little bit more, because it's very secretive, right? So you're always having to triangulate in on what's going on, right? You don't get like the type of satisfying data that sometimes you can get when you're researching, let's say, like the controlled demolition of 9/11, or Yves Guérin-Sérac coming out saying exactly, in some manifesto that's leaked. You don't get so much of that. But the role of the so we know that, in the West you have like the Theosophists, the order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucian Order, all of these different pseudo-Masonic groups that all interface, that have very similar characteristics, but maybe, different flavors of the same ultimate Gnostic satanic garbage. But in the Arab world too, like there's, going back to the Templars, we're interfacing with certain sects of Sufi cults that had a secret mystery order initiation process that the Templars, who themselves were like a pseudo-Christian Mithraic cult, overseeing the clash of civilizations of the 11th and 12th and 13th centuries. That was being made possible through their interfacing with a common grouping masquerading as Muslims, but not really. There was something much more dark than the shell of Islam, right? And they were also working with, obviously, certain Kabbalistic, nominally Jewish, but actually satanic Gnostic sects of these same Jewish orders that are all interfacing. They're all weaving together the same thing. Also touches on like what Jacob Rothschild was. Was he actually Jewish? Did he care about Israel? No. Like, why do so many Zionists and fascists kind of get along always? Like, why is that? So it has to do with this whole deeper occult synergy. And so in the Islamic world, there are a variety of these things, of these different orders. And I'd like to get a better mapping of that to see how they play into the establishment of things like the Muslim Brotherhood, things like, whatever it was that was shaping Turkey, that people like even Fethullah Gulen was a part of too, with the Gulen networks that were expelled, in the 90s. That didn't come out of nowhere. That's part of something more ancient. What the fuck was that?
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it last week. I'm still working on it. I have like 3 or 4 different articles really like 7 articles, but 4 articles that I actually have written right now that I'm trying to get the sequencing on them right. But basically, it lays out the Muslim Brotherhood. It lays out the Hashemite clan, which is like Prophet Muhammad's clan. And actually, the first one I'm going to publish, I think, I kind of use like the Game of Thrones, like Stark family, as kind of a parallel to kind of help people understand, because you have like this really, really like sinister takedown of the Hashemites, and then you have the reemergence of them with Rashid. Harun al-Rashid, he was a Hashemite, even though he was like living in like the far-flung like Persian area of Iran. He was actually like from the Banu Hashim, so he was actually part of that clan, and then he comes in and is actually like a great leader. So anyway, but I digress. So
Definitely interesting stuff.
Yeah. But
and
anyway.
somebody wrote in the comment section, they wrote, but you're leaving out the Jesuits. It's like, no, we know about the Jesuits. It's
we're gonna
on the radar.
We're gonna get to the Jesuits. The Jesuits are gonna be another one. Like, that's another Gladio topic, because again, I think you can probably do multiple episodes, maybe not as many as you could do on Gladio, but the Jesuits, I want to make sure I get like my head fully wrapped around the Jesuits before we do a show on it, because I want to really distill it down to its because there's a lot. They've been around for a while, and there's a lot of what they were involved in.
The key thing for counterpoint, I would advise because look at what came before them that was rebranded as the Jesuits, and then look at the fact that they were co-created the same year that the Anglican Church was created in 1534.
Yep.
And then look at the role of the Venetian grand strategists and Kabbalists in both of those stories. And Venice comes into play as the controlling hand in both stories. That's going to be one of the most useful keys, I think, for some of those doors.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we will be doing the Jesuits soon, so stand by for that. All right, so let's wrap things up. We'll do a Badlands boost. So if you want to support us, a great way to do it is to go to badlandsmedia.tv. If you click over here on the right, it says support Badlands. You click on this, it takes you to this page, and you click on Badlands Boost, and that'll actually take you to a separate page, our Badlands shop page. You can do a drop down to select a specific show. This first one I see is just to Badlands Media in general. I'll go ahead and read it because it's from today. It says it's from Bacon Pancakes, $20. Dr. Rainer Fulmich, I hope I'm saying that right, who ran civilian vaccine trials, aka Nuremberg 2, was recently arrested on the 17th of this month. He knows too much. Interesting. We'll have to look into who he was. But yeah, that's the only boost we have since last week. But yeah, I would actually encourage people to go back and look at this. If you just like search for breaking history, there have been some people who've provided some really, really, because we have a smart audience, really, really insightful comments that stay, and you can actually go back and look at the old comments. And so I would encourage people to go like just peruse this. This is a great way to do like a Rumble rant, because it doesn't just go away once the show ends. So I'd encourage people to look into that. But yeah. Any closing thoughts, Matt, on Gladio? This is a topic that we're going to revisit on other shows. So I know we didn't even really fully scratch the surface on this. There's so much more to discuss, but I did drop the link to that video I mentioned between Hamster and Colonel Towner-Watkins in the comments. I'd encourage everyone to go listen to that. There's a lot of other great interviews that Hamster and the Colonel have done regarding Gladio, so you can look into those. And like I said, we will be revisiting this as we discuss other subjects that are, of course, connected to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's something that was not on my radar properly for so many years, and it's really more embarrassingly recently in my life that I really learned the importance of Gladio. You know, I'd heard about the name secondarily, NATO's secret army, and I just didn't sink in the importance of it in 2008, 2009, you know, and I think it was really 2019, 20 or so that I started taking this really seriously, and my wife took the lead, doing a lot of work on Daniela Ganzer's research, and there's some really good scholars who did work, but it's often treated, one thing I've noticed is it's often treated academically as something which is interesting about the past, but doesn't tie in when many of these books that have been written about it treat the topic. It doesn't treat it the way you and I think anybody responsible should, which is, how does this impact our current world that we're living in right now? There's this detachment of the subjective and the objective aspects. And so it's so important. It ties everything together. And like you said, everything is kind of connected to everything. And I know that could sound kind of flaky, but it's true. And if you have a proper value system of how the machinery works, you can know like where you get at the heart of a causal nexus that interests, like, we could have talked about, we could do a presentation on the Nazi SS and the Jesuits. We could do something on the Jesuits and the Round Table movement and the Round Table movement and the Nazi SS. We could do something on the occult underground of Madame Blavatsky and Annie Besant and Lord Milner. It is connected, and how that's tied to the Fabians. That's connected, and how that's tied to the American fascists of the Council on Foreign Relations and these occultists that were doing seances that were transformed and rebranded into the whole UFO psyop that Alan Dulles also ran with people like Carl Jung, who was tied into the same occult networks, channeling messages from otherworldly beings and stuff to shape strategy and policy on how to mind fuck the population around reviving ancient mystery religions and superstitious cults of the ancient world, but under a science fiction, transhumanist, alien sort of set of narratives controlled by a priesthood, yet again, to overthrow anything legitimate and authentic about Christianity or Islam or Judaism that actually was resistant to the system of global enslavement. So it's interesting. Yeah, there's so many points you could take. And I hope that people after watching our shows are thinking more about like the way of thinking, not so much it's like cool, like you always say mind-blowingly interesting facts. I say a bunch of interesting facts where we try to, but that's not the purpose of why we did the show. It's to really help people tap into this method of thinking that is highly empowering. You could do things that PhDs can't do generally because the way the PhD structure in academia works is to deprive the mind, to reward the mind for using bad habits of thinking that don't work in discovering causality. And the more you get your mind into that world for years, producing papers, getting rewarded for being a mechanistic thinker that can use basically the art of bullshit tied with memory, to make big diatribes that sound authoritative and impressive, but actually mean nothing, the more you self-castrate. And then you're told, oh, now you can work at a think tank. Now you can go into the world with your PhD and have meaning in your thoughts and actions. But it's like that doesn't work because you've just destroyed your mind in the process of getting that paper. But anybody can access this realm of discovery. It's open for anybody.
Now you can go write white papers for the Rand Corporation. We do actually have a few rants that I'm so glad that I didn't miss these this time. So let's run through these real quick. Sure. Iron Time, $5. Hadn't heard of Gladio until I was introduced to Colonel Towner-Watkins over a week ago. I bet you guys are going to put even more color on it. How can something so pervasive be unknown by so many? Completely agree, and I hope that we have. There's so many more interesting facts about Gladio and connection points out there. So I encourage people to go just keep digging on this and looking into it and sharing what you find, because there's so many things that we can connect it to. Maga Keys Girl, $5. Sounds like the show Man in the High Castle was more nonfiction than fiction. Great show. You both are very talented and informative. Never missed an episode. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you for the kind words. And yeah, I think I only saw the first season of that show, but I do think that show, there's a little bit of like disclosure with that show. And I don't know if you're familiar with that program, Matt.
Yeah, I watched 2 seasons, and it's an entertaining show, very insightful. But Philip K. Dick, I started looking into Philip K. Dick, and it's not a positive revelation. He's tied to the occult underground too. It's part of the Matt. It's part of the program.
Is he the writer of it?
Yeah, Philip K. Dick is like a wizard of zeitgeist control and Jungian archetypes, who was receiving channeled messages from hidden masters, and just like Gene Roddenberry too. I like Star Trek. I'm a Star Trek fan, but I'm my research has also allowed me to reevaluate who he was and why he was and how he generated and why he generated his sci-fi scenarios and stories, and part of the occult underground too. It's very, very dark stuff that he was tied to.
Well,
yeah.
Just keep in mind, you can always enjoy like the fictional entertainment as long as if you're aware of that stuff, as long as you're just aware that like what you're consuming potentially might have those sort of elements in it. You can then guard yourself against it, and still enjoy the entertainment, for the entertainment value, but just not let it like take control and influence your mind in a subversive or subconscious subliminal way. And the final rant, Seahawk Mom, 1987, $10. Great episode today. Can't wait till the next one. Truly enjoying engaging the brain. Thank you for that, Seahawk Mom. We really appreciate y'all's support and y'all taking interest in this. It's great that people are so eager and excited to learn about history, because I'm not someone who was like obsessed with history when I was younger. I didn't really even develop an interest in it until I was like 18, 19. And that was really because of like architecture is what made me think of it, like all the connection points. But once you figure it out, I mean, yeah, you really do develop like a huge appetite for it.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's it. Yeah, well, I hope you all enjoyed this, and we will see y'all next week. We'll have to figure out what next week's topic is. It probably will be driven by whatever happens in the news, but we'll see. So
I would say so. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Until next week. Thank you, Gordon.
See y'all.